And welcome back to our coverage of the Mackinac Policy Conference. I'm Christy McDonald, and thanks so much for joining us. And joining me now is Congressman Dave Trott. He's from the 11th District and is a Republican and a freshman congressman, so welcome.
Well, thank you, Christy, for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
So talk to me a little bit about what it has been like in Washington for the first 5 months on the job. Well,
it's been interesting. You know, I spent 30 years in business, so this is my first time holding office, and it's a bit of a learning curve, but the good news is I now feel like when I go in the morning, I sort of understand what's on my schedule and what's ahead. And you know, the first few weeks, I'd look at my schedule. There'd be 20 meetings, and the funny thing about Washington is they schedule like 3 things for 10 a.m. and I'm like, well, how does that work? And now I understand how those kind of...
Okay, now how does that work?
So actually, the first time in February, I looked at my schedule, and I had a Foreign Affairs Committee hearing at 10 a.m. I had a Judiciary Committee markup of a bill at 10 a.m. And I had folks from the Oakland County Schools coming into meet with me in the office at 10 a.m. So I said to my chief, well, how's this going to work? And she said, well, it's real easy. Go to Foreign Affairs. When they gavel the committee to order, you want to be sitting there so you can get on the list of folks to ask questions, because it's based on who's sitting in their chairs when they start the committee hearing. Mm-hmm. Then run over to Judiciary, because they'll need your vote for the markup of the bill. And then we'll bring the school folks over, and you can meet in a conference room outside the Judiciary meeting room. And then if you have to go and vote, you can run back and vote, and then run back in the meeting room. And I said, okay, I think I understand.
I think I can handle this. What have been some of the biggest surprises for you?
I think, you know, on a positive note, I'm more impressed with the people than I expected. And I have a new theory. You know, people ask, what do you think of Congress? And they always rate among the lowest of all the professions out there.
Absolutely, yes.
But then you say, well, what do you think about your guy or girl? And then they say, oh, I like my person. My person's great. And the people are more capable, Democrats and Republicans, than I expected. And the negative is the place as an institution is as dysfunctional as I expected as well. So, and I think there's reasons for that, but there are some very intelligent, capable, talented people there, but it doesn't always work so well in terms of the collective body.
So you're on the Committee on Foreign Affairs.
Right.
And tell me what you've been able to do in that capacity so far.
Well, Foreign Affairs is very different than Judiciary. We have a lot of hearings. We don't mark up that much legislation. A lot of the votes are very bipartisan. It's not unusual to have a unanimous vote. But we've mainly been focused on the president's foreign policy and some of the perceived failures in that regard. And so we've had hearings on Syria and ISIS and Crimea and China, and of course we've had a number of hearings on Iran and the nuclear deal with Iran.
And you felt very strongly that Congress should have a say on that deal.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think there's a lot of folks, Democrats and Republicans, that worry that the president is so determined to have a deal with Iran be part of his legacy that we'll end up with a bad deal. And you know, I think, you know, a bad deal is far worse than no deal. So
let's talk a little bit about representing Michigan in Washington and what you'd like to push for in that arena. There's been a lot of talk about Michigan losing clout because we have so many new faces now in our congressional delegation. What do you see as some of the things that you want to push for on Michigan's behalf?
Sure. So, you know, fundamentally the easiest thing that all members should do, Democrat or Republican, is set up a good team to take care of people in the district with problems and opportunities. So we've done that. We got 7 people in the district, 7 people in D.C., and we're doing a good job helping veterans get their benefits. And we had a constituent call up, and he had a $13,000 fine by the IRS that he thought was wrong, and we got it reduced to $86, and he promptly paid it. So we're taking care of the district and the constituents, which I'm proud of. But clearly we need, you know, to deal with highway funding and some of the issues there. We need to push back on the most recent EPA ruling in terms of, you know, the Clean Water Act and how far that should be allowed to affect the private sector. And then we have to continue to try and shrink the size of Washington, because, you know, from what I hear from business owners, you know, Washington just gets in the way. So we got to keep the government out of the way. And if the government has to be involved, I'd much rather have the governor or Brooks Patterson spending the money than the federal government. So.
Congress kicked the can down the road a little bit on the highway funding, and that impacts what's happening here in Michigan as well. What do you expect to happen when that's up in
I think they're going to kick the can down the road again, and that's the other surprise I guess I didn't mention is Washington's real big on these short-term fixes. You know, we did it with Homeland Security. We're doing it now with highway funding. And it's just no way to run things. And so I expect when July 31st comes, there'll be another short-term fix for the highway funding.
Doesn't that kind of circle back around to the beginning of our conversation where you said that people are angry with the representation in Washington and not happy with the decisions that are being made?
Right. But I guess it does. But if you talk to individuals, they'll say this is no way to run things. But we don't have control of the Senate because we don't have 60 votes. We have, of course, a president that has a different agenda than much of the Republican Congress. So that's part of the beauty, but also part of the problem with our republic is we have these checks and balances, which are, I'm a big fan of our Constitution, but that's what exacerbates these problems, in my opinion.
Last question for you. What is the perception of Michigan on a national stage when you're in Washington? What are people asking you about?
It's a great question. I think people feel like Detroit is come through some tough times and is on its way back. So I get asked a lot about, what do you think, what's going on in Detroit? I said there's a lot of excitement in Detroit, and the bankruptcy was a necessary process, and it's come through stronger and better. I think a lot of people have respect for the governor and what he's accomplished. Our unemployment is now kind of mid-range in the country, so I think a lot of people feel like Michigan's back on the radar. And if you think about it, it's a great state because we don't have a lot of the problems that the rest of the country does. We have plenty of water and plenty of great manufacturing skill sets. So it's a place that people recognize is on the rebound. So.
All right. Congressman Dave Trott, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your time on
Thanks,
Mackinac.
Christy. Thank you for having me on the show.